Hello, everyone. Welcome to Future is Blue, the weekly newsletter promoted by Funcas and Agenda Pública. And we're here to talk about the Spanish Recovery Fund. This week, the Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez presented some more details about how Spain is planning to use the Corona funds. And we're joined today by Serafín Pazos-Vidal, Agenda Pública analyst, and he's been following quite closely the process of how Spain is planning to use these critical funds. So thank you for joining, Serafín. And let me start by asking you about your assessment of what we know so far. I know that Spain has not presented the plan yet, but we know quite a lot. So what is your assessment?
Well, thank you for having me. Indeed, the Spanish Prime Minister presented an outline, not the actual plan, but an outline of the Spanish recovery plan 2 days ago. It's an interesting piece of work because, of course, it's trying to recast this recovery as a way of refashioning a number of key structural problems that Spain has, and very much aligned with what the Commission presented as seven key priorities or flagship initiatives a couple of weeks ago. So in that respect, this fits very much with what was expected, and of course, I mean, there's obviously a bit of political presentation. You can imagine it makes aspirational things with realities. I think it's important to distinguish between what we know for sure, which is the traditional budget. I mean, traditional budget of the EU allocations are more or less known, and that's about in terms of structural fund, rural development fund, the traditional funds that Spain used to get, it's around 43,000. There's a top up to that with the EU recovery or next generation EU program. Also in Spain, people tend to call it recovery plan, but that second bit, which is almost like well, more than double that amount of known funds, depends very much on a range of issues, like whether the member states will ratify the July agreement in terms of allowing the Commission to go to the markets to finance this other part of the plan. But overall, the stage management that was done a couple of days ago fits with what was expected and what the European Union and the European Commission was expecting it. I think that the issue will be the detail. In that respect, it's quite encouraging that the Spanish Prime Minister addressed head-on the issue of need to improve management as one of the key structural reforms that is necessary in Spain, not just to manage the fund, but actually to manage the whole state, as perhaps the current situation, coronavirus, is quite a poignant exercise of what needs to be done. Thank you.
You mentioned now that the management of the funds, and I think I read your article that you published in Agenda Pública this week, and you say this is the biggest challenge. And in fact, we've covered this before, and we've analyzed how before Spain was not fully taking advantage of EU funds. And the challenge is big now because we have, on the one hand, the 21-27 regular funds, we may call them, of the regular EU budget. And on the other hand, we have the Next Generation EU, that is widely known as the recovery plan, that brings more than double of those regular funds. So if there was a challenge before, the challenge now is triple or double or triple. So what key ingredients we should consider, or the government of Spain should consider, to not make the same mistakes and take full advantage of all these funds?
Indeed, I mean, the challenge that you say is triple. I mean, you have the Spanish administration still have to spend half of the money allocated on the traditional funds 2014-2020. That will happen because they still have 3 years to do so, but there's still an enormous backlog on that, which has been, of course, made even more complicated because of coronavirus. Because actually some of these things have to be physically in offices to process bills and so on, and a lot of that has been delayed by the pandemic. Secondly, the Spanish administration, regardless of what happens with the Next Generation EU part of the program, needs to needs to prepare new plans for spending the traditional funds and start making designing the programs. And finally, there is like at least 59,000 of the recovery and resilience facility, which is a completely new fund. It's not yet clear how it's going to be managed. It's expected to be in a more like the cohesion fund in the past, in a centralized way. And there's a whole new structure that has to be devised to develop that. That is the fundamental issue that will make or break any success in the management of this triple excess of, in a way, excess of abundance of funding. And in terms of specific priorities, I mean, obviously, there's like 7 big priorities, but in reality, if there is something that has not been done so far with the EU funds in Spain, because there has been investment in green technology or in transport, is that 5% that the Spanish government is allocating to administrative reform. If there's any priority that should be prioritized because of, there's so many things that have to be done in a short time, should be that, because that will have a knock-on effect on the traditional funds and then the ability to process the so-called next generation EU funds as well.
Thanks, Serafín. How important it is, talking about the Spanish administration, how important it is that the regions and the central government are aligned to present the plan, to implement the plan. I know that President von der Leyen is expected to join this month the meeting of all the president of the regions with the president of the government, with the prime minister. So what's the role that the regions and the central government are expected to play to make sure this plan is a success?
Well, in Spain these days, there's a fashionable, as a result of the need of more coordination between central government and regions because of coronavirus, there's a new term called co-governance, which was obviously invented by the PR in the Prime Minister. But in the EU, there is a legal requirement called the partnership principle that already expects the central government of Spain and any member state and the regional governments and local governments where appropriate to actually work together in the formulation, design and implementation of the programs. This to a certain extent, as I say, already exists. But if the coronavirus is any proof of that, that shows that the mechanisms for coordination should be improved and should be intensified. I mean, Madame von der Leyen is German. In Germany, the German regions and the German government meets very, very regularly. There's a very extensive cooperation in all four forms of domestic or EU-related matters. In Spain, where the Spanish regional presidents and the prime minister meet, is actually front page of the news because it's such a rare occasion. That is the sort of things that Mrs. von der Leyen will no doubt expect. These mechanisms that have to be said, the prime minister had already highlighted that will be intensified. That will be essential that it happens. But perhaps what was not clear in the prime minister announcement is whether there will be just increased coordination at the political level, which is necessary, but because of the realities of managing the funds, what is needed is a much more structured cooperation at officer level. So the day-to-day of the management of the funds, I mean, there should be a situation where the ministries in Madrid will have a very detailed knowledge of what is happening with the last smallest program in the smallest region in Spain in almost real time. That is the level of coordination that, once again, the coronavirus crisis show that is lacking or is not sufficiently good in Spain. And in a way, the recovery fund is an opportunity to address this structural problem that is not just about investing, but actually about better managing the whole multi-level system of the Spanish political body.
That's a very good point, because I think the crisis of the corona has shown the challenge for the administration to respond in real time, to coordinate itself, to manage data as it's expected to do. So very good points. Serafín, I think this was very interesting. I think we touched on the key elements of what we know so far of the so-called Spanish recovery plan. And I want to thank you, and I'd like to invite you in the future to follow very closely how Spain and other member states take advantage of these critical funds for this very bad situation. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Stay well.
Thank you. You too.